In a world with artificial intelligence, how do we transform education? Thanks for tuning in. I'm Daniel Lopez, and this is the AI Education Conversation, where we explore the opportunities, risks, and impacts of AI across education. If you'd like to join the conversation, check out the AIeducationconversation.com. Let's jump in. Hey everyone, hope the week is treating you well. One noticeable impact of the explosion of artificial intelligence is the proliferation of AI products. We've all seen them everywhere. Already, there are so many AI products that can do one off tasks and are being promoted, sold, and used by folks, educators and schools included. AI products are definitely fun and exciting, don't get me wrong, but AI has the potential to be much more than just a single product or task. It can be more than a lesson plan creator, more than an AI tutor, more than an image generator. What does that world look like? As we begin to paint a comprehensive vision for the role of AI across education, in classrooms, in offices, hallways, and backpacks around the world, what are we driving towards? I had the opportunity to ask the recently named Chief AI Officer at Sacramento State, Dr. Sasha Sidorkin, aka the AI Czar, about the role of AI across the vast educational landscape. Beyond having one of the coolest nicknames in the game, Dr. Sidorkin brings over 30 years of educational expertise in higher education, along with navigating many technological innovation waves to the conversation. What I valued most is the depth of our conversation. While we explored some of the tactical pieces, we went beyond products and began to contextualize the value of AI and the value it can foundationally bring in a modern educational experience. If you're interested in my biggest takeaways, check out the companion show notes in the episode description or sign up for the conversation at theAIeducationconversation.com. I share all show notes with my community 12 hours before sharing with my social media networks. If you have any other thoughts on today's episode, you can join the conversation at theAIeducationconversation.com or feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. Humans at the heart of education. Enjoy the episode. What's up, everyone? I'm thrilled to announce that I will be presenting at SequoiaCon 2024. If your team, school, or district, or institution for that matter, is ready to take the leap in exploring AI implementation, my session will support with strategies for implementation and navigating change management. The team at Evergreen is also giving any of my followers $50 off the conference registration if you use my code AI Combo. You can register at the link in the show notes. Early bird registration ends on Thursday, February 1st. I hope to see you all at my session. Humans at the heart of education. Dr. Sasha Sidorkin, aka the AI Czar of Sacramento State. Welcome to the AI Education Conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so as I was just telling you a little bit there, very excited to just have a conversation with you today. I've been following the announcement of your new role as Chief AI Officer at Sacramento State, along with the blog where you continue to post your thoughts on AI very closely. So, but before we get too far down, I'd first love to just know, as somebody who's now and has the opportunity to be the head of AI at a large public institution in California, and you have gotten this nickname as the AI czar, like how did it start? Like, how were you first introduced to AI and what did it bring up for you the first time you interacted with AI?
Well, I've been following the developments of the neural networks for a while, for maybe at least 10 years now. I was aware, but like many of us, I underestimated how quickly the technology becomes available to the mass audience. So I think when it came out in November of 22, by December, I was playing with it. By January, I was using it every day, many times a day, because I was a dean and administrator back then. And I quickly realized that it saves administrators' life because ChatGPT and others are really good at bureaucratic writing. Anything that is boring for you to do, trust me, AI will do better and quicker than you do. Everything that is fun to do, you better do it yourself. I actually started to experiment with it. Like I said, in December, I wrote a book over the summer about the uses of AI in higher education. And the president of my university heard about that and looked at it, and he offered me this position. So I stepped down from the dean's job, and now I am the chief AI officer. The czar name is more of a joke. In American bureaucracy, the title czar is given to somebody who doesn't really have any real power, but you may want them to look like they have some power.
Well, it's a pretty cool title, though. I mean, I'd have to say AI Czar. It sounds really awesome, but yeah, I hear your perspective there. And again, congratulations. I mean, on the promotion. I think having the opportunity to be a thought leader in such a big way with an institution that has resources to be able to make a real positive impact, hopefully on the country and the world. I think is feels like a really exciting position to be in. I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that. You were recently obviously named the head of this
Mm.
National Institute of AI that Sacramento State is launching. So as a part of your early thinking, I know that obviously it's just getting off the ground. I saw this announcement in December, so I would imagine there's so much strategic planning still happening. What are what are you tasked with? What are some of the big North Star things you all are currently outlining for the work you're hoping to do? And then what are some initial questions or priorities that you have on your to-do list here to tackle?
Well, I've been in higher ed for a long time, for over 30 years. So we had several technologies that were introduced to us. None of them was as big as the AI change. So, and it's so big that actually requires some leadership and strategy. That's basically why we're doing it. And each industry is affected differently. In some industries, the layoffs already started, people losing their jobs. We're not in that position, but in education and a larger society, like I said, the change is a little bit too large for natural kind of absorption of natural adoption of technology to happen. The public needs a strategy, the education and other public government, public agencies in the government and nonprofits, all of them need some sort of understanding how we do this change. Like there are specific issues for education, specific for, I don't know, social work and medicine, healthcare. So, and they're just, that's what we're trying to do. And then the National Institute will try to help figure out that strategy, offer recommendations to policymakers, to philanthropists, where to put their money. And then we also will try to set an example how we as institutions, Sacramento State, will transition the world infused with AI. We'll try to solve some theoretical and practical problems and share them freely with the world because that's what public universities do. We're not going to make money on it. We are here to serve the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great to hear. Obviously, I think you said it so well that AI is not just, it's not just Chat GPT, right? It's not just a product. I think there are still a lot of folks who have not yet dove into using artificial intelligence like you and I have and figured out so many ways that it can enhance our workflows. And what I think people start to realize as soon as they do take opportunities to play around with AI is that, it's what a lot of folks in tech call a general purpose technology. It's electricity, right? It is the foundation for so many other products, experiences, and processes. It's not just one thing. And so as you also described the strategy, the leadership, establishing guardrails, being able to highlight best cases is going to be very critical. And it sounds like you all are thinking about that not just across education but also across other sectors as well. I think I heard you say in your response there.
Yeah. So the natural reaction for people, especially in education, is just to be afraid. All you have to, if you want to, if you get scared, take one of the, if you're a teacher, take one of your assignments, put it in Chat GPT and see what it can do. I call it the naked prompt test. Just nothing. It's just what you tell students to do and what it does. And then, of course, the first reaction is, oh my God, how they're all going to cheat and whatever. So there is this panicky reaction. I think there is a deeper layer. We've been relying on writing in education for many decades, 200 years, to teach students to assess, to, train them, develop higher level thinking. And now suddenly we can't use it in the same way we had been using because AI just writes for you, especially it hit really the mid-range skills. So the basic skills like literacy, you still need to be able to read and write. AI is not going to be useful to you if you don't know how to write, right? So the basic, phonemic awareness, basic literacy is still needed skill. And then the higher level skill, still also very human. Like if you want to have a creative, original idea, I'm sorry, but AI ain't going to help you with that. So if you want to really put something that sounds great, that it has a great piece of writing, AI is not going to be. It is a terrible poet. It will not write good poetry. However, the mid-range skills, like how to write, 5 paragraph essays, perfectly grammatically correct English, it can do it for you. So, and we've been spending hours and thousands of hours trying to teach people how to do the mid-range skills. And suddenly we need to figure out which ones of them are really worth teaching and which are not. And they could be leapfrogged over and people go straight from being able to write to really creating something original, creative, and meaningful. That's the challenge. And that's too much for one person to really figure out. We don't have a theory of user AI in education. We don't have enough use cases where we can kind of detect the patterns. We don't know if it's going to hurt students in acquiring some of the foundational skills. I don't think so, but I can't prove it yet. So that's the job.
Yeah, I mean, could not agree more with your perspective there. And I do think there's such an appetite as you have described from educators and I think professors to like really understand in a world of AI, how do we assess if we can't write in the same way, if we can't rely on the good old essay like we used to? What are some of those options to do so? And it's interesting that you have how you described the assessment of writing because I actually just did an episode last week where I talked about this exact topic and some strategies that I have found to be successful and or I've seen teachers use to essentially get student authentic work. And so to your point, I think it's you're still kids are going to still need to know how to read and write. And so to be good at using any of these AI tools, that needs to be true. But then once we get to that basic level of proficiency, there's this really exciting world that then opens up where you can explore with asking questions in a different way that we weren't asking before. Let's go beyond comprehension and or just a basic regurgitation of facts to like really complicated scenarios that AI can't fully just take a prompt and spit something out. Let's go multimodal. How cool would it be if a student actually is doing a podcast just like this to demonstrate their mastery in a topic or a subject,
Right.
right? So those are, I mean, some of the things that I talked about there. But I think overall, just as you described, like being able to not just give your opinion that those are good ideas, but be able to say like, here's facts and here's how we know. I think there's such an appetite from our educators right now. And to your point, they don't have the bandwidth to do that right now. They're already wearing so many hats. There's so much that they're tasked with doing, and having spaces like the National Institute that you all are positioning to launch here, I think is going to be so critical to to play this role of thought leadership. That being said, on the topic of writing, let's talk about a way that you've used this on campus. So I know when I was doing some reading on your profile, I heard about Project Wawa.
Yeah.
And so so I mean, tell me a little bit about Project Wawa. What was it? What was the goal? And what did you find?
It's a professional learning community. It's just several faculty volunteers got together, and what we're trying to figure out is writing assignment with AI. Basically, how do you do that? In other words, if you require students to use AI in the writing assignment, what would be the process? And so, and I think there's certain things I already learned. Like one of them is if you just give the same essay, but you change your rubric, how you grade it. If you de-emphasize the mechanics of writing and really emphasize more the creativity, the critical thinking, the creative thinking, and what I call the discerning thinking, the ability to judge the quality of the output. So if you emphasize those, the same paper could be graded as A paper or a C paper, C minus paper, depending on how you look at it. So it's an opportunity to really raise expectations and tell students, look, with this tool like that, you should be able to write for a real journal, a publishable paper, right? So because so much is done for you. The other one that we found is that if you ask students to use AI, you have to kind of teach them how to use it. So what one of my colleagues, Chayan Chang, is doing, she is asking students to submit the prompts, series of prompts that they use to get to the output that they create. So, and that actually shows that the use of AI for writing is actually complex cognitive skill, right? It's a complex skill. It's like writing, but slightly different, right? It's similar to writing in many ways, but also different enough. But again, it's challenging. It's complex, and you can grow in it. So that's what we care about in education. Do you grow or not? And yes, absolutely. The first time you use Chat GPT, and if you use it for a year or more, like me, every day, many times a day, trust me, I am better at this than somebody who just started. And that kind of grows. I think it could be actually a multi-year process. You don't get everything at once. There is the intuition to it. There's also skill and experience, but most of it is experience. Of course, you just need to use it. So that's what we discovered.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to your point, what excites me about that is in the process of growing using these tools, it's students get to drive that experience, right? There are so many experiences in education today that are teacher and professor led, right? Where the teacher or professor is demonstrating their knowledge in something by lecturing students, walking through what they know. What's so exciting though about AI tools is even in absence of totally understanding how to use the tool, the student is the one who can sit there, who can type in some prompts, who can ask it to do, who can see what the output was given back to them, and then continue to modify. And they're going to learn, they're going to expand based on that. So I think the more that we're putting students in a position where they get to drive their learning and reflection, we get those that the cognition working in their brain versus
Mm,
them being talked at. That's the way that we're going to create real learning. And so it sounds like
mm.
you all have been able to position, your students at Sacramento State to have that experience with some guardrails that you're noticing you have to develop there around giving them some initial foundational thinking.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, learning is, I mean, even though there is AI now, and you can actually learn anything you want on your own because it is an excellent tutor and coach and everything. So if you're what we call autodidact, which means the person who likes to learn on their own, that's heaven for you. Unfortunately or fortunately, most people are not autodidacts. Very small percentage of population can just sit there hour after hour and learn some skill or some advanced. Most of us need a company for that. So we need classmates, we need a teacher. It's sort of the creating that relation or background for education is very important. So some people are concerned that AI is going to replace the teachers, and I just don't see any reasons to think so. There is no AI that can build relationship with humans. It's not even on the horizon. I haven't even seen a vague prototype that could do that. So I think, as soon as instructors, teachers, professors realize that, they may be able to relax a little bit. The robot knows everything, but they cannot put it in a way that will motivate students, that keep them engaged and keep them interested. That's where our job remains.
Yeah. I mean, I could not agree more. And I know you wrote a blog post about this, and I'd love to dig in further in just a second. But just to respond to your point there on being an autodidact, I have a question though related to that. Um, so there's a professor out of San Diego State named Dr. Jean Twenge who writes this book called Generation, and her theory is that across like the big generations that have that have existed in the United States, the silent, the boomers, the
Mm,
Gen Z, etc., that technology is such a critical component in their evolution, in their perspectives, and the way that they change. So maybe a question I have for you as a follow up there is, could you see a world where because artificial intelligence does exist, that more people now become autodidacts, as you
mhm.
described, or do you not see that happening?
No, I don't see it happening. So the technologies, I'm 60 years old, so I lived before the age of the internet, and now I'm working on AI. So there's been a rapid technological change. It really didn't change anything fundamental about human beings and their ability to learn and to relate to each other, engage. We're a very adaptable species. We adapt to this change as well. But again, we adapt by not completely changing, but also by remaining the same. So yeah, I don't think that this whole social theory of learning has several different, very prominent author. Nobody in cognitive sciences or in curriculum theory disputes that. I didn't see anyone dispute that. There's people like Vygotsky, like Brunner, like Bandura, all of these great psychologists and educators established that to learn, you actually need to be in collaboration with somebody. That's an ancient trait that we got it evolutionary as social species. That's how we always learn. since before any technology. And this is how we're going to continue to learn. So that is unlikely to change.
Yeah. This feels like a really good place now to like bring in your blog post and ask some lateral questions related to that here. So there was one blog post you wrote that really stood out to me, which was where you were just talking about the relational pedagogy that needs to be true for teachers. So it's not that my understanding of your fundamental argument was that teachers aren't going to be replaced, but the role is going to shift,
Yeah.
and that it's going to shift because of relational pedagogy. Can you just say a little bit more about how you see their role shifting based on this?
Well, so AI is in education has two different functions, very distinct one. One is an efficiency tool. Teachers, professors will save time because it helps you grade student papers. It helps you develop syllabus, develop learning assignments, develop criteria, and all of it. So that burden will be reduced. And the question is, why? What are you reducing your burden for? What are you going to be doing instead? What we'll do is what requires actually human connections, like getting to know your students, for example, getting to know something about them, building that relationship of trust with them, getting them excited about something that you're excited about. Those things, people in education have been known for decades that this is a very important part of our work. So pedagogy relation is not anything new. It's just, to put it in simple terms, we never had time for that. If you're a high school teacher, you can see 150 kids a day, 150. How do you build that relationship with them? If you're in elementary, of course, it's fewer than that. In college classrooms too, sometimes you have a lecture with 300 students. How do you actually build that connection that they learn something that in relation to you? So I think that's what we need to really actually figure out. After we're done with AI, the next step is, okay, so how do we build those kind of wheels that kind of make learning possible? Yeah, and kids can look up stuff on their own. That's fine, but why should they do it? What motivates them? I think those are bigger, actually a lot more complicated questions than the use of AI.
When I read your blog post, the experiences that I could just not stop thinking about was, so most of my career, I mean, I've spent in college access, and folks of the show are going to know I talk about it all the time, but most of my career, my mission has been to help high schools, our young people, to learn everything that they need to know to be able to successfully apply and attend great institutions like Sacramento State,
Mm.
right? So what I as a big part of that experience, I've been able to teach students. We've done lectures, we've had conversations about topics of things you will need to know, either in the college application, financial aid process, those types of things. Now, as you can imagine, students might learn a little bit, they get 5% better. But what immediately stood out to me about what you wrote is that I kept thinking about how, if I had to describe the like single two most pivotal experiences that I thought our students were getting in our program, beyond just like the information and the conversations we had, it was number one, when we took all of our kids to a sophomore boot camp at the beginning of the experience, and we talked about how critical it is throughout your life to take risks, and how sometimes you're going to be scared to do things, but being able to do so is going to help you grow in life. And then we allowed them to go on like these zip lines and these giant swings to be able to do that, right? And then I was also thinking about this other time where we have students go on college tours, and they get on an airplane or they get on a bus, they go see these colleges, and you just see them light up. You see them learning and growing in so many ways. And to your point, I mean, I just don't see how AI replaces some of these pivotal experiences that allows you to just grow so much in your humanity and your understanding of the world. And that happens in community and with the relationship of your mentors and with your peers. And so I that really just came to heart for me when I was reading and receiving your posts on this as well.
Yeah, people come to college. Some people come for just for the diploma, and others come just for the experience. But the vast majority of people come for both. It's a part of life that you create, kind of your life story. Something that you do to grow up and to mature and to become somebody else. So to reduce it to really like the specific diploma is really not fair. That's not what education is about. You know, if it was about, I mean, if you're really determined to be, I don't know, this specific profession, you can do it, on your own. Like I said, it's very hard to do, but you can do it. Yeah, so that's why all these predictions about, college is going to be in demise, education is going to close because people will just learn everything on their own. They're just simply not realistic and not understanding the cultural context of education. People want
Yeah.
their kids to go to school, even if it's not strictly necessary to learn. Even if you imagine there is this perfectly smart, infinitely patient robot sitting in your living room and teaching your kid anything that the kid wants to know or have to know, and tailors all the assignment to the kids' levels and everything. That's gonna be boring as hell. So students students are not gonna like it. That's not a real threat. I wouldn't even worry about that. So yeah, education will, hopefully, if we manage it well, education will be liberated, will flourish, it will become more humane, less mechanical than it is now with the use of AI.
Yeah, I think that's why I have dedicated so much of, the last 15 months of my life to having these conversations because to your point, my belief is that not that AI in of itself will transform education, but hopefully AI serves as a catalyst which will transform the educational system so that we can be more human in these experiences as I think we're describing here. It opens up the creativity, the opportunity to connect in a deeper way, free from some of the standards or the tests or the mundane tasks that we have to talk about on a day-to-day basis. And let's like get into the peer connection, the mentor connection, the relationships, and have time and space to be able to do that. I wanted to direct your attention to just kind of another curiosity I had, which is so I know in another one of the blog posts that you wrote, you had kind of been talking a little bit about some of the educator mindsets here, and I obviously you and I we're drinking the AI Kool Aid. We're invested in the tools. We like the tools, but there's a lot of folks out there even today across education that have still not tried a tool like ChatGPT themselves. They're only reading about it. They're only hearing about the academic integrity stuff, right? They're not hearing about the other many advantages that these tools bring. So, from your perspective, are you noticing other barriers, though, beyond mindsets in higher education or education at large for why institutions have been slow to adopt artificial intelligence at scale?
Yeah, I don't know if they have been slow. There is sort of a normal rate of innovation adoption. So if you look at AI, it's actually maybe faster than some of the other ones that adopted. Like for example, years ago, I remember the learning management systems first came on board. I forgot what WebCT, I think, was the first one, and then there was Blackboard and Canvas and all of that. It took a good 10 years for universities to adopt them. So this one is actually being adopted faster, I think, because there is a lot of pressure from the world, right? So employers, especially, exercising a lot of pressure. So the university have been active in trying to figure it out. That they're not being passive at all. At least the CSU system is, there is a statewide committee on AI. Almost every campus has some sort of a group, or sometimes two or three different groups that work in policies or implementation, on training, and all of that. Yeah, you can't expect large systems like that to kind of switch overnight. It will take time. And very few universities actually adopted, like, forbid everything. This kind of, I would say, ill-conceived defensive stance. Very, very few of them. I mean, I've heard maybe of one or two. The rest of them are actively trying to figure it out. And it's the same actually with K-12, K-12 system and community colleges as well. Very leadership is very interested. We don't understand exactly how to do those, but yeah, we are moving as fast as we can, I think. And like, yes, there are people who don't want to hear about that, but there are also hundreds of people who want to experiment. Just show us basics and we'll go take it to classroom and we'll do something with that. So yeah, I think it's normal. Industries are not that quick either. There are some industries that are ChatGPT ready. You could do it now. But for many of them, you actually need to build additional tools to harness AI. So like sort of intermediary range of tools. In education, it's both. We have some tasks and skills that can go straight to the chatbot, and others actually need the little intermediary tools.
I think you bring up a really good point there, and
I totally agree with you that in the context of technological innovation and adoption across
Mm.
education, it's probably still going a lot faster than what it has gone before. I think more so where my mindset was at was the fact that I'm noticing that across the workforce, the rate at experimentation and adoption seems to be happening a lot faster than what it is in higher education and K to 12. But I think to your point, it's less about the dialogue and more just about the concrete ways that it's happening. But I think you're right that that can change and it's something to keep our eye on. I'm curious though that just from your perspective as you think about the road ahead for institutions, even if there is this appetite to experiment, are there any barriers or things that you're noticing that might get in the way of adoption in a bigger way for either schools and districts on the K to 12 side or higher ed institutions? Any things that they could really point to or need to plan around?
So there is sort of the normal strategy of professional development, training, and implementation, right? So that's what people will be doing, and they could be done better or worse. I think one of the threats that I see is that because technology is kind of new, there is a lot of business that are trying to sell products to education. And I don't get me wrong. I mean, I think our, California is the envy of the world about, startup sort of entrepreneurship culture here. We get tremendous benefit from them. But you have to be naive to not to see that a lot of these people are fraudulent. They start, they're
Yeah,
trying
definitely.
to sell stuff that we're basically making money out of thin air. There's this just very tiny skin on top of Chat GPT. Somebody figured out the API protocol and they're already selling it to you, saying, oh, that's and there are hundreds of them already. It will
Mhm.
help you to write lesson plans. Well, I mean, you can write lesson plan with Chat GPT if you only learn that much. Or you can buy into the $50,000 a year license platform for your entire school district, and then you lock into it. Nobody learns anything. You can't change anything without the vendor. You become this hostage to the platform providers. So that's, I think, is a little bit of a threat. We need to be intentional about it and kind of have public policy debates. Also, the education institutions and many other public agencies just don't have a culture of constant efficiency improvement. Like because there is no bottom line, there's no like economic competition. We have an AI czar, but we don't have an efficiency czar at universities. Like nobody routinely analyzes the workflows of support staff and looks at how can they be improved. That work needs to be done. That's a barrier, definitely. If you're just give you a very simple example. If you're a manager, like a higher level manager, and you have an assistant, you really don't encounter anything that is inefficiency of organization because your system will do that for you. You will never know how to file a travel claim, how to buy a chair or a printer or something like that. Only when so your system knows how to do that, but that's a lot of wasteful work that's happening there. I know people who do data entry still. Yeah. We have databases that don't talk to each other, and somebody has to figure out how to take from one into another. All of that kind of it's a common business problem. Any kind of large business or government or nonprofits have them. But I think businesses, because they're fighting for the survival, they sometimes react faster, sometimes too fast. They're very happy to lay off people just because there is a promise of so. So we're the opposites, and we normally don't lay off people, but we have other things to do for them, more creative, more involving human interactions. And that's a challenge. There's also regulations. Higher ed is overregulated in most states, including California. There is a lot of accountability, a lot of paperwork. That some of it is a dubious efficiency that they actually improve the quality. So yeah, there are other organizational structural barriers as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I mean, to your point, education, we have the opposite problem. We're just trying to find a way to make one person be able to do three jobs sometimes because of the labor shortages rather than, being able to lay off people or anything
Yeah.
like that. So definitely noted there. So when you think about AI in education as somebody who's been thinking about AI for a while, been playing around with tools like ChatGPT since they first came out. What use cases seem most promising or exciting to you?
Um, well, there are hundreds of them. I think, in the general point of view, a lot of intellectual work that goes into management has to do with comparing two documents to each other. Like, for example, if you're grading student paper, you're comparing the paper against the rubric. If you're signing a contract with somebody, you comparing the contract against regulations that you have, right? So if you're hiring somebody, you comparing their application materials against the criteria that you have. So if you think about it, and we always thought it was a complex intellectual work. Well, guess what? Claude or ChatGPT can do 90% of that work. So, and I think this is I wish that more people understand that the general principle, whenever you examine the document with another document in mind, that's really a job for AI. It can never get you 100% there. There's always human, discernment involved, but it can get you 80 to whatever, sometimes 90% there. If you're writing a grant application, you compare your ideas against call for proposals, right? You need to match that. If you're applying for a job, you're comparing your qualifications, maybe CV or previous letters against the call or job description. So to blend two documents, that's what AI does really, really well. And I think so that's, if you think about that, what I just described has thousands of applications, many, many applications. And that's, I think, the most impressive one.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more. And I mean, all the examples that you gave, that is normally taking quite a few hours, human hours, to be able to go through that process. Even in instances where you have all the knowledge, you're a master at going through that. But then imagine now you have a tool like Claude, like ChatGPT, that is doing a lot of the initial wordsmithing. It's doing the like 80% low hanging fruit. And then now with your trained eyes, you can go through, you can vet it, you can audit it, you adjust the tone of it for your voice and your style and any type of writing structures that you want. And now something that may have taken you, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours of time is taking you at least 50% less time, if not more.
Yeah, everybody's been promoted from being a writer to being an editor. Congratulations, people.
Congratulations, we all got promoted. So AI, as I'm sure you've recognized too, over the last 15 months, I mean, I have been honestly struggling to keep up with how fast the technology has continued to advance. It seemed like even from the beginning of the year, we went from like GPT-3 to 3.5 to now we're at 4. These Dolly models were kind of cool, but now they're really cool in terms of the images that they can create and how pristine they are. So with how fast everything's developing, just as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about AI, researching it, are there any tools or developments that you're paying attention to that maybe a lot of folks don't know about that you're like, oh, this is cool, and we're going to be talking about this real soon here?
Well, first of all, I mean, from what we know about history technology, there is always a limitation. I think some people imagine exponential, limitless growth. And just because we can't see those limits, it doesn't mean they don't exist. So I think it will be at some point there will be a little stop. It's just from, like the steam engine had limitations, right? It couldn't have a efficiency more than 8% ever, right? So, and then the same with nuclear energy, with electricity, right? Any of them, like automobile has limitations. So it's the same. We'll eventually find some limits where it will stop. And I think that, of course, there is a lot of talk about general artificial intelligence, so which will be sort of what we see already, except maybe a little broader trade. So, and I think what limitation will still be with the ability to create creative thinking. I just don't see really yet even prototypes that could really do it. I haven't heard a piece of music that was written by AI that was stunning. I haven't read a poem that written by AI.
You didn't like Heart on My Sleeve? You weren't a fan of that song?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I think that's probably limited. I'm not convinced that, but I think the one real limit we have is the energy consumption. it eats up a lot of energy. So what I'm really hoping is that the quantum computing, which is completely separate branch of development of technology, showing some promise for many years now. So if we will have a functioning and relatively inexpensive quantum computers, then what happens when you combine the two is really anybody's guess. We're talking about
Yeah.
multiplying computing power by millions, right? So, and of course, it's going to cost less and probably will actually help us with energy consumption. But then also, this kind of tremendous jump, we don't know what's going to do to AI. I hope we will just make it more available and everybody can use it. But I think there is also concerns about existential threat to humanity. They're not without some, I mean, they're probably not immediate, but there are theoretical reasons to be a little bit worried. I mean, I don't think we always ever will have like an evil AI because evil is a very human thing. But we could imagine an AI that just learns to make decisions and has its own goals, and we're not necessarily part of the goal. I mean, that, people smarter than me are thinking about it, and there will be some talk about limitations there.
I think the physical limitations that you named are very fascinating to think about. And I know that there have been, some large tech leaders that have came out even recently. Like I
Yeah.
know Sam Altman came out and said we need to just double down on our investment in chips and making these even more advanced as like one form. But to your point, even on the quantum computing aspect, that is something else that when we are able to make significant developments there, and then we are now powering some of these Gen AI tools or whatever artificial intelligence tools come after Gen AI with quantum computing, it'll be very interesting to just see what those tools can do. But yeah, to your point, I mean, not even just the threat to humanity, but even some of the current biases. I mean, these tools are obviously trained. The machine learning that happens, they're trained off of human data. Humans are imperfect. We have biases. There's inherent things that are hardwired, and I think a lot of folks have pointed out examples that some of the biases in the AI have the potential to also perpetuate inequities in education and not just transform education. So we need to keep our eye on the ball there as
Yeah, the
well.
point about biases is fair point. I mean, if you ask DALI model, say, create me a picture of a student standing in the middle of the campus, it will create a white guy, right? So the default is a white guy,
Yep,
which at
100%.
Sacramento
Yep.
State is not a default. I'm sorry to say. The default would be a Latina woman, I guess, right? So, and it's like that everywhere. I mean, it's no more biased than any other tool, no more biased than say Google search, but it is a serious problem. And I think the way that the AI is developed, there is a fine tuning mechanism, right? So there is a data training, which we can't really control. We really don't know what's going on there. But the fine tuning we do control. And then, of course, like if you ask it to give me a pornographic picture, it won't give it to you. If you say, give me instruction how to build a bomb, it's not going to give it to you either. So there are very specific rules. They're just not specific enough. There has to be more of them.
Yep.
Like you can't assume everybody is a white guy, or European, or so things like that. But I think it's a matter of time. I think all of the AI companies actually working on something like that. Those constitutions are fine tuning directions that they're writing will become better with time and longer and more sophisticated, I guess, which is a good thing.
So I mean, earlier in our conversation, you mentioned the fact that you have a book coming out later this year. Can you give us a little bit of a preview? What are you digging into? What are some of the points that you're going to be highlighting
Yeah,
there?
it's very practical kind of book. It's basically, it's like a map where to look for treasures, right? I don't give you the treasures maybe yet, but I will. It's a map. Like for higher education, it has like three big parts: the use of an instruction, in research and scholarship, and also use it in administration. So, and again, it was a first dip into the problem. There was a little bit of a theory at the end. They put it all at the end, but it's basically, if you're a university professor or administrator, you want to know something about it. It's a relatively small, but fairly practical book on how to do this and what to do.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, I know there's probably a whole lot of people at Arizona State University with that big partnership they just announced with OpenAI that'll probably be interested in reading that book. So,
Good for them. I'm not sure they're clear about what they're going to do with that. I think they got for free the enterprise license, which I'd love us to have as well,
mhm.
because of the, because it's a paid model. It's kind of very, there's like, there's an API barrier basically. So in my perfect view, everybody on campus, this advisor, that advisor, this professor would build their own custom GPTs and just give it to students, and the institution would pay for the usage. Well, you can't do it yet. So because the OpenAI wants to lock people, you can use custom GPTs, but only if you have a paid account. All right. So, which, like, I understand the business model, but yeah. So anyway, if we had, but enterprise, I've heard, costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, I think it's an attempt to lock the technology for the commercial use. So that's where governments also should come in. Yeah. You can do it, but you
Yeah.
have to make an API connection easy or automatic for anybody to use it.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I think even to that last point you said about just the government piece, I know right now, obviously, we've seen over the last year, like the executive order that came out, we've seen some guidance coming from some teams within, the Department of Education. But what I would like to see is just more beyond just guidance, some more resources provided. I know that there's the AI Literacy Act that is, in legislation right now, and hopefully that leads to more concrete models, tools, and tactics that schools can actually use for success. But to your point, there should also be funding. Maybe there's some subsidies that we have or that schools can take advantage of to be able to create partnerships with whatever tool they're most excited about. And they don't have to pay full price or, creating some kind of agreements there. So totally agree. I mean, for a lot of schools, they're not going to be able to pay the 25, $30 per person for every single
Right.
user on campus, as I think currently is what OpenAI AI is
Mhm.
charging, I
Yeah,
believe.
exactly. So yeah, there is definitely the role for the government. They're not rushing into regulation, which is a good thing. I mean, I think, because you can hurt. And none of the governments, regional or federal, are interested in slowing down the AI, because if we slow down, I'm sorry to say, but China won't slow down. If California decides, oh, wait, we're not going to do it. Well, I'm sorry, but the Texans won't. So there is a mad race. There is a lot of competition, which overall is good for us consumers, because the more competition there, the better. But the government needs to make sure there needs to be support. Like, for example, who's going to build accessibility tools with AI for disabled people? Some of those groups are very
Mm,
small. The community of people who are blind is not that large in the United States. It's not a large market. Who's going to develop? And for blind people, that might be a life-changing experience, right? There's also for deaf people, there's implications. So anyway, I think those niches, for educational, I just need to have a few smart people sit down and think through this systematically. So we need support to do that. So I hope there will be some.
yeah. Totally agree. And I will say the cautious optimi hopes that in the process of going through that experience of just developing thoughtful process, I hope that education gets transformed in the process. I hope that it leads to some other guardrails that education has been defined by in the past, such as very rigorous teacher certification processes that hinder certain people from being able to teach, such as looking at some of these later shortages, such as looking at the overemphasis on standardized exams, such as looking at the fact that everyone is so critical that it has to be a 5-day school week that looks this specific way. Hopefully, it also allows us to have a conversation about what education looks like across the board and say, are there places where we can actually reimagine some of these pieces so that these tools will fit and it creates a different experience for students? And so that's my hope that in the process that also gets to there's some space for that as well.
Yeah, we won't be able to solve all the problems with AI. I'm sorry to say. Some of it has to do with the way that taxation structure exists in the United States, for example. Mostly local funding of schools kind of makes inequality almost inevitable of resources. But there's also people concentrate by different social class, and there are over concentration of trouble kids in some schools make it very difficult actually to provide that meaningful instruction, even if you have the same resources. And of course, California is doing probably the best in the union to equalize those access, but God, we have problems there still, in equality. So
Yeah.
yeah, AI is not going to be able to solve that. I mean, where there's political will and money involved, you know. But
Yeah.
but I hope it has equity implications. If we use them wisely, we may be able to reduce the gaps between different groups by using AI intelligently.
It's not going to be able to replace the teacher, as we talked about earlier, right? Or do any of those things. But more so, what I'm hoping it does, at least in the context of state and federal government, is it then you kind of have to have the conversation about what the school day looks like. You have to have the conversation about what standardized testing looks like to have the conversation about AI. That's what I'm hoping, because I feel like there's so many folks up top that are just not having those conversations. The impact of that is we're continuing to do business as usual. We had a pandemic that took place. We came out of the pandemic and everybody's still doing it the same way as pre-pandemic. Every school just has
Right.
more laptops now. And I think my hope is that this finally becomes the thing that serves as a catalyst that really allows us to say, okay, system ain't going to work anymore if we do it this way. We're going to have to make some concessions and adjustments across this system, not with AI, but in order to accommodate AI. And that's really my hope as well. And so totally hear you on that. And again, I think we'll see what happens. I think 24 is setting up to be a really exciting year for artificial intelligence, especially in education. Sasha, I'm curious, like as we close out here, people want to connect with you, learn more about your work, learn more about, the book you got coming out. Where would you invite them to connect with you and learn more about some of the thinking and the developments that you have over
Yeah,
the
so
course
we
of this
just
year?
launched the website and it's just .edu/AI. And there is a tab there, get engaged. We are open to collaboration with wide community, not just on campus, but also from outside, from other sectors of higher education. Community colleges are welcome. K-12 educators also welcome to join, but anybody else. We initially were calling the Institute AI in Education, but we actually changed the title to AI in Society because a lot of this kind of uses overlap into different industries as well, different public industries and private as well. So we are curious about how this technology is used and how is it adopted in the society and how we do it more intelligently. That's the main thrust. So yeah, come and put your name down if you're willing to collaborate. We'll find a way for us to engage.
Well, thanks so much
Thank
for
you, Daniel.
your
It was
time
fun.
today.